Margaret of Anjou, the war queen of England, she led armies when her king could not. England is tearing itself apart. Brother fights brother. Father fights son. The red rose, the white rose. One kingdom, two families, and enough blood to stain an entire century. Most queens pray for peace. One queen rides toward war. Her name is Margaret of Anjou. History remembers her as beautiful, brilliant, unyielding. Her enemies remember something else. They remember a woman who refused to surrender, a queen who gathered armies, negotiated alliances, marched beside soldiers, and fought to keep a broken king upon his throne. Long before England called her a villain, it called her queen. You can almost hear the bells ringing across Angers. The castle overlooks the winding Loire River. Stone towers rise above vineyards and forests. This is where Margaret is born in 1430. She enters one of Europe's most complicated royal families. Her father is René of Anjou, a man known as the Good King René, artist, poet, diplomat, a ruler with more titles than kingdoms. His fortunes rise, then fall. Margaret watches everything. She grows up learning an important lesson. Crowns are fragile. Power can disappear overnight. Nothing is permanent. Unlike many princesses, Margaret receives an exceptional education. She studies languages, religion, history, politics, court diplomacy. She learns to read faces almost as carefully as books. Very quickly, people notice she possesses a remarkable memory and an even stronger will. She is intelligent enough to impress scholars, confident enough to challenge nobles. Neither quality makes life easier. Across the English Channel, another kingdom struggles. The Henry VI of England has inherited the throne as a child, gentle, deeply religious, kind-hearted, but not naturally suited for ruling during dangerous times. England's victories in the 100 Years' War are slipping away. Money grows scarce. Powerful nobles grow restless. The kingdom needs stability. Instead, it receives uncertainty. To strengthen relations with France, a marriage is arranged. Margaret is only 15. She crosses the Channel toward a country she has never ruled, never even seen. The wedding is magnificent. Cathedrals glow with candlelight. Trumpets echo beneath vaulted ceilings. Nobles cheer. England has a new queen. At first, Margaret believes she can help. Henry is kind to her, gentle, thoughtful. But almost immediately, she notices something troubling. Her husband avoids confrontation. He hesitates. He trusts almost everyone, especially the wrong people. Meanwhile, England's nobles become increasingly divided. Each believes someone else is to blame for the kingdom's troubles. Every council meeting ends with more resentment, more suspicion, more whispers. Then, the unthinkable happens. King Henry suffers a complete mental collapse. For months, he barely responds to the world around him. He does not recognize visitors. He does not speak. Some accounts say he remains almost entirely unaware of what is happening around him. England suddenly has a king who cannot rule, and a newborn prince who cannot yet inherit. Someone must hold the kingdom together. Margaret steps forward, not because anyone invites her, because someone has to. Many nobles are horrified. A queen exercising real political power, making decisions, choosing advisors, protecting the rights of her infant son. To Margaret, there is no alternative. If she does nothing, another man will seize the crown. She has no intention of letting that happen. Among those watching closely is one ambitious noble, a man with royal blood, a man who believes England deserves a stronger ruler. His name is Richard, Duke of York. Before long, Margaret and Richard will become bitter enemies. Their rivalry will ignite one of the bloodiest conflicts in English history, the Wars of the Roses. And Margaret, the quiet French princess, will transform into the war queen of England. The first battlefield is not made of mud. It is made of whispers. Because before swords rise in England, suspicion does. Every noble watches every other noble. Every council meeting feels less like government and more like a room full of knives pretending to be furniture. And at the center of it all stands Margaret of Anjou. Young, foreign, brilliant, unwelcome. A French queen in an English court already looking for someone to blame. And England has plenty of problems. The war in France is collapsing. Money is disappearing. Nobles are fighting for influence. And King Henry VI, gentle as a prayer book and about as useful in a brawl, cannot control the storm around him. So Margaret does what Henry cannot. She chooses sides. She gathers loyal men. She protects her son's inheritance. And that one decision changes everything. Because Richard, Duke of York, does not see a protective mother, he sees an obstacle, a queen blocking his road to power. And Margaret sees him clearly too, not as a loyal servant, as a threat wearing noble silk. The rivalry hardens. York claims he only wants to fix the kingdom. Margaret hears something different. She hears the sound of a man measuring the throne. Then England breaks. The first battles of the Wars of the Roses begin. Lancaster against York, Red Rose against White, and Margaret becomes the fire at the heart of the Lancastrian cause. She is not content to sit quietly in a palace while men decide her family's future. Absolutely not. That would be tidy. Margaret is not tidy. She negotiates alliances, raises money, writes letters, builds support, moves from castle to castle like a storm in velvet. And when Yorkist power grows too strong, she fights back with everything she has. Her enemies call her unnatural, too bold, too aggressive, too much, which, in medieval politics, often means she is doing exactly what men do, and they hate how good she is at it. Then comes one of the great reversals. Richard, Duke of York, is defeated and killed. His head is displayed wearing a paper crown, a brutal message, a warning, a queen's revenge, some say. Whether Margaret ordered every detail or not, the image sticks to her legend like blood to snow. And suddenly, her enemies have their story. Margaret is no longer just a queen. She is dangerous. A woman who will not soften. A mother who will not yield. A political force that refuses to disappear. But York's death does not end the war. Oh no, that would be far too merciful. His son rises, young, handsome, charismatic, Edward of York, soon to become Edward IV. And if Richard was a threat, Edward is a thunderbolt. He wins support quickly. He fights brilliantly. He gives England the image of kingship Henry cannot provide. Strong, decisive, victorious. Margaret now faces a nightmare, a rival young king with battlefield momentum, a husband who cannot lead consistently, a son whose future hangs by a thread. Most people would collapse under that weight. Margaret does not. She keeps moving. She takes the Lancastrian cause into exile. She seeks allies in Scotland. She negotiates in France. She swallows humiliation when she must, because she is playing a long game with no guarantee of mercy if she loses. Every decision carries the same question. How do you save a dynasty when the kingdom itself has turned against you? And Margaret's answer is always the same. Fight again, again, again. Because to Margaret, surrender does not mean losing a crown. It means abandoning her son. And that is the one thing she will never do. A queen without safety, a wife to a broken king, a mother guarding the last hope of Lancaster, standing on the edge of another campaign while England bleeds around her. Because next, Margaret of Anjou will return from exile, gamble everything on one final fight, and discover how cruel history can be to women who refuse to lose. Exile changes people. Some become bitter. Others become broken. Margaret of Anjou becomes even more dangerous. Across the sea, she refuses to believe the House of Lancaster is finished. England may now wear the white rose, but Margaret still carries the red. You can almost picture her moving from castle to castle across France, no longer welcomed as a queen. Instead, she is a mother searching for allies. Money is scarce. friends are fewer still. Many rulers admire her courage, far fewer are willing to risk their own kingdoms to help her. Margaret learns another lesson about power. Kings promise easily, they deliver cautiously. Still, she refuses to stop. Every audience, every treaty, every noble willing to listen, she pleads the same case. Help me restore my husband. Help me save my son. Help me reclaim England. Years pass. Most people would surrender to fate. Margaret never does. Then, history gives her one final opportunity. The powerful English noble, Richard Neville, 16th Earl of Warwick, changes sides. Europe knows him simply as the Kingmaker, the man who helped place Edward IV of England upon the throne. Now, he has turned against him. If anyone can restore Lancaster, it is Warwick. Margaret hesitates. She has every reason to distrust him. Yesterday, he crowned her enemy. Today, he offers friendship. Politics makes strange companions, especially during civil war. Eventually, Margaret agrees, not because she forgives him, because she has no better choice. Together, they prepare one final campaign. England erupts once more. Warwick invades. Edward IV flees the kingdom. For one astonishing moment, everything Margaret has fought for finally seems possible. King Henry VI is restored to the throne. London opens its gates. The Lancastrian banners rise again. Church bells ring across the city. After years of defeat, Margaret has won. Or, so it appears. There is one cruel twist. Margaret herself is still crossing the sea. Storms delay her fleet. By the time she lands, everything has already begun unraveling. Edward IV has returned, faster, better prepared, more determined than ever. Then disaster strikes. Warwick meets Edward at the Battle of Barnet. Fog blankets the battlefield. Confusion spreads. Friendly troops attack one another by mistake. Warwick falls. The Kingmaker is dead. Margaret has scarcely reached England, and her greatest ally is already gone. Most commanders would retreat. Margaret marches forward. She still has an army. She still has hope. Most importantly, she still has her son, Prince Edward of Westminster. Everything now rests upon him. Mother and son march toward one last battle. The armies meet at the Battle of Tewkesbury. The fighting is savage. The Lancastrian army collapses. Escape becomes impossible. Then comes the moment that breaks Margaret forever. Her only son, Edward of Westminster, is killed. Whether he dies in the fighting or shortly afterward remains debated by historians. What is certain is that the House of Lancaster loses its heir. Everything Margaret has fought for, every alliance, every sacrifice, every year spent in exile, every battlefield crossed, vanishes in a single afternoon. Soon afterward, King Henry VI dies while imprisoned in the Tower of London, almost certainly murdered. With Henry dead and her son gone, the Lancastrian cause dies with them. Margaret is captured, not as England's queen, as a prisoner. The woman who once commanded armies now sits behind locked doors. For years, she remains in captivity, until the King of France finally pays her ransom. She returns home, not in triumph, in silence. She spends the last years of her life far from the battlefields that once echoed with her commands. No throne, no army, no husband, no son. She dies in 1482, poor, almost forgotten by those who once feared her. Yet history remembers what her enemies could never erase. Margaret of Anjou refused to become a spectator. When her husband could not rule, she ruled. When armies were needed, she found them. When kingdoms collapsed, she kept fighting. Her critics called her ruthless. Her supporters called her courageous. History calls her something even more fitting: the War Queen of England. She did not win the Wars of the Roses, but she proved that one determined queen could shape the course of a civil war, command the loyalty of armies, and challenge the mightiest nobles in England. So, we leave Margaret here, standing on a rain-soaked battlefield beneath the banner of the Red Rose, sword lowered, crown lost, spirit unbroken. A queen who fought not for glory, but for her family, for her king, and for a kingdom she refused to surrender without a fight. If this story stayed with you, if you admired the courage of a queen who would rather face an army than abandon her family, don't stop here. There are more women like Margaret, women who stood in the center of history's greatest storms, fought impossible battles, and refused to disappear when the world demanded they surrender. Stay dangerous, stay loud, and never let them hold the pen.